You forgot who you were. This video will remind you. There's a pain that has no name. It's that feeling of living someone else's life, of looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger. Maybe you feel this too. That silent restlessness that doesn't get resolved with achievements or distractions. It's as if you've been playing a role for so long that you forgot about the actor behind the performance. If this video reached you today, maybe it's because your soul is whispering. It wants to remind you of who you always were before you learned to hide. Before you got lost in other people's expectations. Before you built walls so high around your heart that even you can't find the entrance anymore. This is a conversation about the journey back home. Back inside yourself. It's a gentle invitation for you to remember that, even after so much lost time, returning is always possible. When did it all begin? Maybe with a small silence, a no that you swallowed, a dream that you buried, a truth that couldn't be spoken. It was in that exact moment that the slow process of forgetting yourself began. Have you ever had the feeling that you're living someone else's life? That you lost something essential along the way, but you can't quite name what it was? Was it at school, when you realized that being different hurt? When your tears were called weakness, and you learned to swallow them like poison? Was it at home, when your genuine feelings bothered the adults, and you discovered it was easier to pretend you were okay? Or was it later, at work, when you realized that being yourself wasn't enough to be accepted? The forgetting of oneself never happens all at once. It's like gentle erosion, drop by drop, day after day. You drifted away from your essence like a castaway who distances himself from shore without realizing it. First came the dreams that seemed impossible, so you stored them in a dusty drawer of your heart. Then, the preferences that weren't approved by the group. Next, the emotions that were labeled as inappropriate. Each compromise with falseness was small, almost imperceptible. You said, "Everything's fine," when it wasn't. You smiled when you wanted to cry. You agreed when you wanted to disagree. And without realizing it, you built an entire life around a self that wasn't true. A self molded to please, to function, to survive. But that left the soul behind, like a lost child in a crowded mall. Today, when silence arrives, in those rare moments without distractions, you feel that peculiar emptiness. As if something very important had been lost along the way. As if you had left the most precious part of yourself somewhere in the past, and could no longer remember where. It's a strange longing for someone you used to be, but who now seems like a distant stranger. In Carl Jung's depth psychology, the soul represents that part of you that eternally pulses for meaning, for authenticity, for genuine inner connection. It's your truest center, that which always knew who you really are, even in the darkest moments. The soul is like a silent sage who lives within you, patiently watching your attempts to be someone else. But we live immersed in a world where the ego screams too loudly. It wants success at any cost, constant recognition, approval that's never enough. It convinces you that you're only worth what you achieve, what you produce, what others think of you. And in the desperate rush to meet these deafening screams, you stop listening to the soul's delicate whispers. That's why you can have everything you ever wanted, the dream job, the perfect relationship on paper, social recognition, and still feel profoundly empty. You can have conquered what society defines as success and still wake up in the middle of the night with that feeling that something isn't right. It's because the ego has been fed, but the soul remains hungry. The soul speaks quietly, but it speaks truth. It whispers in moments of silence, when you're alone. It appears in your most vivid dreams, in songs that move you inexplicably, in those moments of nostalgia, when you remember who you used to be. It's not in a hurry. It doesn't compete with the world's noise. It simply waits for you to get tired of the external circus and come back home. It doesn't want you to be perfect. In fact, it finds that idea absurd. It wants you to be real, whole, human. And the first question it always whispers is, who am I when nobody's watching? Many of us began abandoning ourselves when we were still vulnerable children. That's when we learned that being ourselves generated rejection, punishment, or abandonment. So we adapted, creating edited versions of ourselves that were safer, more accepted. But that weren't true. The child you were instinctively knew who they were. They felt things without social filters, dreamed without limits, loved without fear of being rejected. They had a natural connection to joy, curiosity, spontaneity. But when the adult world repeatedly said that wasn't allowed, you began building walls around that inner child. To protect them from pain, you hid them so well that even you can't find them anymore. You created defensive layers: the good boy layer, the rebellious teenager layer, the responsible adult layer. And somewhere, beneath all these layers, that authentic child continues waiting. This broken reflection in childhood's mirror isn't your fault. You were just a child trying to survive in a world that often wasn't prepared to receive your truth, your sensitivity, your emotional intensity. You did the best you could with the tools you had. But now you can choose differently. You can look at that wounded child with compassion, not shame. You can recognize that they still exist within you, waiting to be welcomed with love. And you can begin the delicate work of rebuilding the reflection, piece by piece. Carl Jung called the persona the social mask we develop to be accepted in the world. It's the role we play daily: the perfect child, the tireless professional, the friend who never says no. This mask is necessary for life in society, but it becomes a problem when we forget it's just a mask. Maybe you've become an expert at pleasing people. You learn to read others' expectations like a secret language. You develop different versions of yourself for each situation. One personality for work, another for family, yet another for friends. And amid so many masks, you lost sight of the true face that exists behind them. The weight of pleasing everyone is crushing because it's literally impossible. You end up living a life that isn't yours, making decisions based on what others will think, not on what you really want. You choose careers that impress but don't fulfill you. You maintain relationships that drain your energy but seem socially appropriate. And even when you get the approval you seek so desperately, it feels strangely hollow. It's like receiving applause for a brilliant performance of a character you hate playing. The approval doesn't nourish you because it wasn't your true self that was accepted. It was just an edited, polished version. What saved you in childhood might be imprisoning you now. The strategy that protected you when you were small and vulnerable has now become a prison that prevents people from truly knowing you. And what's worse, it prevents you from knowing yourself too. Taking off the mask is terrifying because you have no idea how you'll be received. What if people don't like your true face? But here's a liberating truth. Only by removing the mask will you discover who's really on your side. And only then can you finally breathe freely. When we drift too far from our essence, the soul begins to scream through the body and mind. Do you recognize these signs? That tiredness that sleep doesn't resolve, that restlessness that no distraction calms? It's as if there's a hole in your chest, an echoing emptiness. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone, as if you're watching your life from the outside. Sometimes it comes as an inexplicable sadness that visits without warning. You're having a normal day, and suddenly a deep melancholy invades you like a dark wave. There's no apparent reason, but it's as if some part of you is mourning something you can't even identify. Other times it manifests as floating anxiety, a diffuse fear that hovers over you like a gray cloud. A constant worry, as if you're always running from some invisible danger. It's the soul trying to alert you that you're living too far from yourself. There's also existential insomnia, when you lie in bed and, in the night's silence, a deep restlessness keeps you awake. It's not worry about the next day's tasks. It's something deeper. A feeling that your life isn't really yours, that you're wasting precious time playing a role you didn't choose. These symptoms aren't signs of weakness. They're urgent messages from a part of you that wants to come home. They're invitations for you to stop and listen to what's happening in your inner world. The exiled soul is knocking at the door, asking to come in. The shadow, in Jung's psychology, is everything we reject in ourselves. The anger we can't feel, the fear we can't admit, the sadness we consider unacceptable. The shadow isn't evil, it's simply human. And facing it is essential to remember who you really are. Maybe your shadow carries the anger you learned to swallow because good people don't get irritated. That anger didn't disappear. It was pushed under the rug of consciousness, where it ferments and sometimes explodes in ways you don't understand. Or maybe your shadow harbors the fear you hide because real men are brave. It could be that your shadow guards the sadness you've repressed for decades because there's no reason to be sad when your life seems perfect on paper. Or the desires and dreams you buried because they were considered impractical or childish. Each denied emotion becomes part of this shadowy region of the psyche. The encounter with the shadow is uncomfortable because it shows you aspects of yourself that you've spent your whole life trying to deny. It's like looking in a mirror that reflects not just your face, but all the parts you consider shameful. Your first impulse is to look away, pretend you didn't see. But here's the secret. The shadow also carries incredible gifts. Repressed anger, when consciously integrated, can transform into strength to defend your convictions. Recognized fear can become wise prudence. Accepted sadness can transform into deep compassion. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's the guardian of lost parts of your soul. When you stop running from the shadow and find courage to look it in the eyes, something magical happens. You discover it's not as scary as it seemed. You realize those rejected aspects are natural parts of being human. And by accepting your shadow with compassion, you become whole again. Not perfect, but complete. There are inevitable moments in life when we're withdrawn from the world, voluntarily or involuntarily. Sometimes it's a conscious choice. You simply can't take the noise, the demands, the constant need to perform anymore. Other times, life makes this choice for you. People drift away, bonds break, and you find yourself alone when you least expected it. Loneliness hurts because it's fundamentally about absence. It's when you desperately want to be with someone, but there's nobody available. It's when you urgently need understanding, a hug that says everything will be okay, but you only find emptiness around you. It's the feeling of being lost in a world that seems to have no place for you. But there's a profound difference between loneliness and solitude. Solitude is a sacred state. It's when you consciously choose to be alone, not to escape the world, but to reconnect with yourself. It's when you use silence not as punishment, but as a precious opportunity for inner reconnection. The transformation from loneliness to solitude doesn't happen automatically. It requires a shift in perspective, courage to turn your gaze inward, and patience with yourself. But when this transformation happens, it's profoundly liberating. In true solitude, you discover that you're not alone in the way that matters most. You're with yourself. And this can be the richest and most honest company you've ever had. It's in this sacred space that you can remove all masks without fear of judgment. You can feel all emotions without needing to edit them. You can ask the most difficult questions about your life. Solitude becomes a temple where the soul can finally speak without being interrupted by the world's noise. It's where you can honor your sadness without rushing to get over it. Where you can acknowledge your fears without being called weak. Where you can dream your most impossible dreams. Even when we spend years forgotten by ourselves, living as strangers in our own life, the soul never gives up. It continues to call us with loving persistence. It doesn't shout. Shouting isn't its style. It whispers through vivid dreams that wake us with racing hearts, intuitions that come from nowhere but carry truth, synchronicities that seem like coded messages. Have you experienced this? That song that plays on the radio exactly when you most need to hear certain words? That book someone mentions casually that seems to have been written for your current situation? That place you visit for the first time, but that awakens something ancient and familiar? The soul has its own poetic language. It doesn't communicate through logical arguments that satisfy our Cartesian mind. It speaks in metaphors, in visceral sensations, in coincidences that touch something deep within you. It whispers through your intuition, those moments when you simply know something without being able to explain how. And if you can stop for a moment, really stop and listen, you'll realize it never really stopped talking. It was there when you looked at the starry sky and felt something infinitely greater than yourself. It was there when you read a sentence that seemed to have been written to illuminate your confusion. It was there when you had that feeling that everything would be okay, even when nothing indicated it would be. The soul communicates through small daily miracles that our materialist culture teaches us to ignore. But they're there, in the bird that sings at your window when you need joy, in the child who smiles at you on the street when you feel invisible, in the unexpected hug when your loneliness seems unbearable. This is the crucial turning point. It's when you begin to realize that maybe you were never really lost, that maybe the soul has been calling you all along, sending signals, waiting patiently for you to remember how to listen to its secret language. Carl Jung saw in alchemy a metaphor for the process of inner transformation, converting the heavy lead of pain into the gleaming gold of self-knowledge. It's not about avoiding suffering, That would be impossible. But about finding deep meaning in it, using pain itself as raw material for the soul's rebirth. All the pain you carry, the rejection that still burns, the abandonment that left scars, the loneliness that sometimes seems unbearable, it wasn't in vain. Each wound you sustained taught you something fundamental about human nature, about fragility and strength, about the complexity of being alive in this difficult world. Every time you broke emotionally, you learned something valuable about how to rebuild yourself with more wisdom. Every time you hit rock bottom, you discovered reserves of inner depth you didn't even know you possessed. Each emotional scar is evidence of your capacity to survive what seemed impossible to bear. Inner alchemy happens when you traverse pain with full consciousness, when you allow yourself to feel it completely without being destroyed by it. It's the recognition that the part of you that suffered deeply is exactly the same one that possesses the capacity to flourish magnificently. The sensitivity that made you suffer more intensely is also what allows you to feel beauty, art, love with a depth that few experience. The introspection that sometimes leads you to melancholy is the same quality that allows you to understand other human beings with almost supernatural empathy. Your sufferings weren't random obstacles, they were the path itself. Each scar is proof that you're a survivor. Every time you got up after a fall is evidence of your incorruptible inner strength. You're not a victim of your story. You're its alchemist. And when you look at your journey from this transformed perspective, something magical happens. Pain transmutes into wisdom. Suffering becomes compassion. Loneliness transforms into sacred solitude. And you realize that nothing was lost. Everything was alchemically transformed. Individuation, in Jung's view, is the sacred process of becoming who you really are. Not who your parents wanted you to be, not who society expects you to be, but who you are in your purest essence. It's the courageous journey back to wholeness, after having lived fragmented for so long. It's the transformative moment when you stop trying to be perfect, an exhausting and impossible pursuit, and accept being complete, whole, human. Complete with your lights and shadows, your strengths and fragilities, your moments of wisdom and your episodes of confusion. It's when you stop living only through the mask and begin to courageously inhabit your true face. It's when you look at yourself in the mirror, not just the physical mirror, but the mirror of the soul, and recognize that ancient sparkle in your own eyes. It's not the artificial shine of forced perfection. It's the genuine sparkle of authenticity, of real presence, of life being lived from the inside out. It's the light that was always there, like a candle lit on the altar of your heart. The individuation process is like reassembling a complex puzzle of yourself. Each piece you rescue, each honestly accepted emotion, each rejected aspect you integrate with compassion, each difficult truth you finally admit, makes you progressively more whole, more unified. When you put together enough pieces of this inner puzzle, something extraordinary happens. You can see the complete picture of who you are. And it's a beautiful image, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. It's an image that makes sense, that has coherence, that tells a unique story that only you could live. The great revelation of individuation is that you don't need to transform into someone different. You just need to remember who you always were, underneath all the layers that were added over the years to make you acceptable. The person you've been searching for so long is already there, waiting patiently to be recognized. They were just temporarily forgotten, like a treasure buried in your own backyard. They never left. They were just waiting for you to stop looking in all the wrong places and finally look within. And here we arrive at the most important truth of all. You never stopped being who you are. You just temporarily drifted away, forgot for a while, got distracted by the world's noise. But your essence, that which makes you uniquely you, that never left, was never destroyed. Your soul waited with infinite patience, like a seed sleeping through the longest winter, waiting with faith for spring to sprout again. It didn't get irritated when you forgot about it. It didn't take offense when you ignored it. It didn't give up when you traded it for more palatable versions of yourself. And now that you've made it this far, in this moment of recognition, something deep is stirring within you. You're remembering, like someone slowly waking from a long and confusing dream. You're feeling that ancient familiarity, like when you reunite with a dear friend after a separation that seemed endless. It's you finding yourself again. The journey back home, back inside yourself, won't necessarily be easy. There will be days when you forget again, when you return to old patterns, when you doubt whether all this is just fantasy. But now you possess something you didn't have before. You know it's possible to return. You have evidence that you're not lost forever. You know that no matter how far you drift again, the soul will always wait for you with open arms, without judgment, without resentment, without impatience. Just pure love and unconditional acceptance of your imperfect but precious humanity. You are stronger than you can imagine, deeper than you appear to the world, more valuable than you believe on most days. And you always were. That strength, that depth, that value, they're not achievements you need to reach. They're innate gifts that came with you into this world. The only difference is that now you're beginning to remember. If this video touched something deep within you, if it awakened some recognition or hope in your heart, know that this wasn't a coincidence. Your soul brought you to these words for a specific reason. It wants you to know that you're not alone in this journey back home, back inside yourself. In my ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes, you'll find concrete practices and deeper reflections to continue this process of reconnecting with yourself. And if you want to be accompanied on this ongoing journey of self-discovery, consider subscribing to the channel and liking this content. Sometimes, all a tired soul needs is a gentle reminder, and a sacred place where it can feel truly understood and welcomed.